So what the heck do I mean by an anti-fragile investment portfolio? I've been a financial advisor now for over 20 years, and I've seen a lot of people build a portfolio that during scary times is really hard to stay the course. And if you can't stay the course through a full investment cycle, including the ups and the downs, you're going to end up losing. So an anti-fragile investment portfolio is one that makes it easier to stay the course, no matter how scary things get. So let's talk about it, because I think it's critically important for everybody if they want to achieve their long-term investment goals. Number one thing that keeps people from meeting their investment goals is they end up being a forced seller in a down market for a variety of reasons. Either they didn't plan properly and they have a liquidity crunch, they need cash at a time when the market's down, or they become a forced seller in a down market. The market's down, it's scary, they can't sleep, and the pressure is just too much. They can't sleep, they can't stand the pressure anymore, and they blow out of their portfolio. And you can usually tell when people are starting to blow out of their portfolios right when things are about to turn around. So unfortunately, they ended up buying high and selling low, which is not a formula to succeed in investing. So how do you build your own anti-fragile portfolio? First, let me tell you where this term comes from. During World War II, bomber planes that would go and do their mission, and they'd come back and they'd be, riddled with bullet holes. And the engineers would look at that and say, okay, let's look at where these planes are getting hit, and let's build that up structurally so they can survive better. But you know what? That was wrong thinking, because the fact that that plane made it back said, you know what? The plane can survive getting hit, having a bullet hole in this area. Rather, what you want to do is ask yourself, what do the planes look like that didn't make it back, right? So that analysis is looking at survivorship bias and saying we need to beef up these areas. But some engineers were really smart and said, no, just the opposite. We need to put armor on the places where there aren't bullet holes. And that's what I mean by an anti-fragile investment portfolio. I want you to have armor where the people that weren't able to make it through an investment cycle, I want you to be able to make it through the investment cycle, which again is both the ups, but more importantly, the downs. So what are the things that enable you to stay the course when things are scary? And this may be the most important lesson that all of us as investors learn. Okay, rule number one for this is the things that you do to protect your portfolio during down markets are the things that you did 3, 5, 7 years ago. So as I record this, we're at pretty much an all-time market high right now. Things are feeling pretty good in the stock market. People are feeling courageous. The U.S. economy looks like we might squeak out a soft landing to this fight against inflation. As I said, the market's at an all-time high. Unemployment's at an all-time low. So times are good right now. Not for everybody. If you're a tech employee right now, it doesn't feel like times are good. But in general, people that want a job have a job right now. And so it's easy to feel secure. And when you feel secure, you can feel like, you know what, I can take on more risk. Well, what determines how much risk you can take on is not when you're sleeping well at night, is not when things are going well. What determines how much risk you can take on is how well you can sleep at night when things are really ugly out there. So job number one for an anti-fragile portfolio, a portfolio that's going to help you stay the course, is to get your asset allocation right. And it's not to protect you from days like today. It's to protect you from days like the first couple weeks of COVID. It's to protect you from like the great financial crisis where from top to bottom, the S&P 500 dropped almost 60%. Think about that. If you had $1 million in your investment portfolio, let's say you got unlucky and that's when you retired. Right before that happened, well, from top to bottom, if you were 100% in the S&P 500, you went from $1 million and feeling pretty comfortable to down almost to $400,000. That'll keep you awake at night. And that's why for most of us, 100% equity portfolio is not the right match. And 100% in one investment product, even if it's the S&P 500, is probably not the right match for us. So job number one is protect yourself during the good times. So I want you to be thinking about that now. And one of the main ways that you do that is with your asset allocation, which is just a fancy way of saying what percent of your portfolio is in stocks, what percent of your portfolio is in bonds. And a lot of people will say, well, I'm a 50-50. I'm half in stocks, half in bonds. I don't want you to think that way. I want you to think with your bonds. When I say bonds, I'm talking short duration, bonds that mature in 1, 2, 3 years, super high quality that you're very sure that you're going to get your money back unless the world changes pretty dramatically. So maybe like one of the United States' largest retailer, I'm not going to mention any names, but is a company like that going to be around in 100 years? I have no idea. But are they going to be around in 2 or 3 years to repay a $20,000 bond, a $100,000 bond? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they will be. So high quality, short duration bonds, because what you want is you want that stability. So instead of saying you're 60-40, I want you to say, I have 3 years worth of living expenses in bonds, because that's going to make it easier to stay the course. When you realize, okay, the market's down, but it doesn't matter because I don't need to sell my stocks to pay for my living expenses. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is I want you to think about what you're optimizing your portfolio to do. Are you optimizing your portfolio to beat the S&P 500? I hear a lot of people say that, and my pushback would be, what the heck do you care what the S&P 500 does? What you want to do is to meet your financial objectives while taking as little risk as possible, right? So I would say what you want to optimize for is the ability to stay the course. If you get that right, a lot of good things are going to happen for you. Okay, the next thing is, optimize on a positive state of mind. The ability, again, to stay the course, to not have those sleepless nights where now all of a sudden you cannot, even if you wanted to, you cannot think clearly, which is why you want to make these important decisions when you're not in the heat of the moment, when you're not in the battlefield, where there's not shells going off overhead and you're fearful about surviving. You want to make good decisions, and good decisions are made when you have a calm, clear state of mind. And I would also argue good decisions are made when you're dealing with a good mentor, a good river guide, a good financial advisor to help you along the course. Now, some people can do that themselves, but I would argue most people are better served by having somebody that they've had a relationship with for many years, who's devoted their life to being a professional in this space. But you don't want a professional, you don't want somebody that's smart, using those smarts for their benefit. You want a professional, you want somebody that's smart, you want somebody that has experience, using this experience for your benefit. And the way to make sure that you get that is to make sure whoever you're dealing with is a fiduciary to you 100% of the time. And that last part of that phrase is really important. Fiduciary to you 100% of the time. A lot of advisors are fiduciaries to you some of the time, most of the time. But what you want is 100% of the time. So just ask that question simply and then get it in writing. And get it in writing that simply. Warren Buffett has 2 rules to succeeding. And the first rule is don't lose money. And rule number 2 is never forget rule number 1. What's Azul's 2 rule? So my 2 rules, similar to Warren Buffett, but different. And I should say I have a lot of respect for Warren Buffett. I was fortunate when I was younger. I actually had a chance to meet Warren Buffett. When I was in business school, he came to my business school class, and I got to ask him some questions. So that's where I got those rules on Buffett. But my rules, Azul's rules, is rule number 1 is never be a forced seller in a down market. And I've talked about that in spades because that's where people get hurt. And rule number 2 is, just like Buffett, never forget rule number 1. And I do have a third rule, which is I want you to enjoy your journey. And that's what this video here is about. 7 things that I want you to think about stop doing in your 50s and 60s in order to enjoy your journey more. I'll see you in there. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.